It's like,
hey,
this is so life-giving.
You got to.
Oh, my gosh.
Welcome into Vertical Pursuit. Mike Barrett, along with Pastor Mike Tatlock. Hey, this is, I want to take a second on this because I want to ask you a question about it and kind of acknowledge it. I didn't even think about it till 2 seconds ago, which is kind of how we roll. There's no real script here if you haven't figured that out yet. Episode 77.
Episode 77.
Yeah, that's what this is.
7-7. I like that. Double
Right.
sevens.
So
Two
let's
good
talk
numbers.
about this now, because I know that some people are really, and I don't really know, other than Seventh Day and all these things, biblically,
Yeah.
the biblical number 7.
Yeah.
And I've heard people say this. And then people get freaked out by the biblical number 6, Mark of the Beast, whatever else. What do you know about that? And do you put much stock in that? Either one?
Yeah, I do. I do. I think
Not
that,
much stock, but you know what I mean. Can you explain
I love it? Yeah. When you look at, this is one of the fun parts, and I'll tell you where it gets really interesting and crazy too. So there's a good way of looking at numbers, and then there's a really bad way of looking at numbers, and people sometimes get mixed in between. But when you look at numbers are very, very significant in the Bible. Obviously, like the number 7 is repeated multiple times.
Rested on the 7th day.
Yeah,
all the way
God
back
rested
to
on the
Genesis.
7th day. He wanted the land to rest on the 7th day, like crop rotation, Sabbath. And so those are healthy rhythms. And then you get to like the mark of the beast, 666. And so then, 6, what does that mean? It's the number of man. Versus 7, many people think is the number that represents God, perfection. And there are other numbers too.
Well, I know I've heard people say that Jesus spoke 7 words of completion at his crucifixion.
He did.
Okay. And then, so 7 is very,
Yeah. So
okay.
you do see 7 used consistently throughout the Bible, and which I think is fun. Like when you study the Bible, there is a place to look at the meaning of some numbers. Well, you take like Pentecost. Penta is 50, right? So Pentecost is a pretty significant number when it comes to the story of the Holy Spirit coming after Jesus' resurrection. And the reason it's called Pentecost is because it came 50 days after. And so, but then it also represents the Old Testament. There was a if you will, in the Old Testament, when God gave the law and to Moses on the 10 Commandments and so forth. So there was timing around these things. That God is perfect in his timing, and he gives us these inferences and kind of clues or symbols of meaning of why he does some things when he does and when he does them. And so numbers can be really helpful and super fun when you're studying the Bible, and it's like little nuggets of breadcrumbs that numbers are like, oh, I tell people this, when you study the Bible, you study it in layers. What does that mean? It means like layer number 1 can change your life. I've heard stories of people who, I remember a testimony I heard of a guy who was an inmate on death row, and somebody gave him a Bible, and in his prison cell, out of anger, he throws the Bible across the room, and it falls on the ground, and it opens up to, and I don't remember the Psalm, and he walks over to pick it up, and he just glances and reads like one verse in Psalm and melts, and just God met him there. And that verse, and somebody say, well, coincidence and randomness. And I would say, well, yeah, I don't know if God like magically opened that specific verse as it fell to the ground. Sure, that could happen. I just think it's the power of just the spoken word of God that and the written word of God is that you could take a line of scripture and it can change someone's life. I remember, I can't believe, this is just stuff we're rolling with. I didn't even think about this.
Yep.
When I was I think I was a senior in high school, I did a mission trip where we were on a basketball team, and we were in Europe. And what we do is we would play pretty big teams, like some junior national teams in countries. We played, I think we were in Hungary. We were traveling through several countries. We were playing the Hungarian junior national team, and we would play these games, and then we would at halftime share a testimony, and then invite people to come follow Jesus. And we happened to be traveling as a sports team with a performing arts team that would do like music and drama, and they'd go out. So we'd go out in the town halls of communities, villages, like some really cool old fountains, and everybody's walking around, and they would do a performance and then share the gospel. And then what we would do as athletes because I wasn't a performer or musician, we would support them and just walk up to people and say, hey, are you interested in the message they just shared? And I remember, this is vivid, as a high school kid, having a conversation with a guy in Budapest, Hungary, just after a gospel message. And I remember this, it was vivid as it was yesterday. He spoke English, and I asked him if he wanted to know Jesus in response to the message that they had just given. And he said, yes, but I was on my way to kill myself and jump off the bridge. So this was a guy who I never met before. I'm just taking his word for it, but he was walking through this town center. You know, those old European cities have kind of the town, you know, with lots of cool fountains and stuff, and people, you know, walking through it. And he was walking through there, and Budapest, Hungary is, you know, they're known for their river features and architecture. He was going to go kill himself, is what he said. And he just happened to stop to listen to this performing arts team share a gospel message. And I'm like, whoa, what do I say? And
it's a little bit of a responsibility there.
Yeah, and I was like, but I'm never going to see this guy. Like, we were literally like within an hour going to leave that city and go catch a flight to go home. So I'm never going to see this guy. And I had a Bible on me. And I don't know, I'm just, you know, here I am, I'm a high school kid. And I remember I looked at him and I gave him my Bible. And I told him, I said, I can't believe I did this, but I gave him my Bible and I said, this will change your life and give you hope. And I said this as a high school kid, looking back, I'm like, what did I do? But I said, if you don't have, I promise you this will change your life. I said, I'm that confident in what I'm holding and giving you, God's word, that if you don't have some sort of even beginning of hope, then you can keep your path. That's what I said as a high school kid. I told the guy, you don't have hope after this? I put it all, it's like I'm gambling. I'm like,
that's a good challenge though.
Yeah, but it's what I said. I'm not making it up. I just, in the moment I said, if this doesn't change your life, then you can go walk to that bridge at the end of this week. I was so convinced that if he would just start reading and is that true of everybody? I would never say that. Just that was a moment. Maybe that's what God wanted me to say. My point is this, is that when you read the Bible, there's layers to it. And I've seen people read one verse and just radically changed. But there's so much more to discover. There's so much more. And so when you talk about numbers, there's all these, when you look at customs of Jewish culture, and like when people understand, we just did a podcast and we talked about the second coming of Jesus and how Jesus would reference marriage and wedding customs, that if you don't know what that is, you're like, oh, but once you do, it's like, oh, that just took me to another layer of reading the Bible. And that's exciting. You're excavating these layers and discovering all these cool truths. So the first layer will change your life, but then there's more to discover. Numbers can be a part of that. It's fun to go, oh my gosh, that's connected to this, this. Where it gets crazy with numbers is numerology is, that's where people in the scripture speaks to, like, numerology is a cultic practice where people use numbers to get in tune with the demonic world to make predictions. So like people will do, fortune tellers will oftentimes use numbers to predict, you know, oh, this number in your life means this, this, and this. And the Bible speaks about numerology is a demonic practice. And so you don't want to overread numbers and use numbers to like create patterns and predictions in your life, because there's some that's tied into the occult and witchcraft and stuff like that, which I've noticed there are some people cults out there that do use numbers in the Bible. It's really weird. So I tell people there's great fun parts of using numbers and meaning, and then there's like, this is where it gets not good, and where it tips you into some stuff that's like occultic, numerology type stuff and trying to predict the future and that. And there's a lot of people who like used to call it what was it called back in there? It was like the Bible code. So this is another like weird sort of thing. I think it was called the Bible code, where people propose the idea that when you read the Bible, if you take numbers and find hidden meanings in scripture, like,
was that kind of what the Da Vinci Code is all about?
It is like that. It is like that. It's a little different, but it's connected to that idea of, okay, so if I have a set of numbers, I can take a verse like John 3:16, for God so loved the world, he gave his, I could use a verse like that, right?
Yeah.
But if I have the right numbers, it's a decipher. Then I can pull out the third E, and then that means
then
this.
I go play those numbers in megabucks at night.
Exactly. If you win, hey, then they owe you something for that. You get a cut for that.
But there is
it's like
that number stuff.
Yeah.
Because now on the back of fortune cookies, when you read the fortune, there's numbers.
They do. They have all the numbers. That's your lotto numbers.
Is that supposed to be your lotto numbers?
It is what it is. That's your lucky lotto numbers. I mean, that's what I use. What do you use? So that's the number piece is the Bible code out there where people are claiming that there are hidden messages in the Bible. And so if you have the right number formula, you can use it as a magic decoder ring and pull out the hidden messages. That's a bunch of, if you ask me, kind of garbage. But anyways, it's fun to talk about. But
yeah, and I didn't mean to. It wasn't going to be like the topic of this. No. I just thought I honestly episode 77, and then I thought the number 7, and and then I was kind of thinking about looking up, and I haven't really ever done this, but that people talk about that the number 7 is kind of used as exoneration and healing.
Yeah.
Which I didn't really know that about.
Yeah.
King David referenced the number 7 in describing the perfect nature of God, saying that like gold refined 7 times.
There's times when the Bible would give a story of a guy who was told to go wash in a pool of healing 7 times, and on the 7th one he'll be healed. And so that's what I'm saying. There's some really cool, what I would say,
supposed to forgive each other. 70 times 7?
Yeah.
Is that what they say?
Yeah.
Peter after Peter asked
how
Jesus,
many times should we forgive someone?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. There's some really great fun, like when you know what those numbers mean, you're like, oh, that's super cool. That's another layer of excavating something in Scripture that God does want us to discover, and that is good. And I think it's just like with anything. There's what God intends, and then there's counterfeits. And so God does give us some insights through numbers and their significance and meaning, and there's something about that.
But that's one of those things we can end up chasing our tail and not really getting anywhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I've even seen that. Like,
but I pay attention to it. Sometimes I ask, like, and this is just a very subjective thing, but I've had people come and say, hey, I wake up every day at 7:47 without my alarm clock going off. Does that mean something? I'm like, well, I would say it could. I mean, yeah, sure. It could. Like if you start seeing a pattern of something in your life of, later that day, there's a check that comes to the mail for $747. I'd maybe start paying attention to something like that. God can use anything. I mean, he can. And I always kind of go back, make sure it aligns with Scripture and doesn't take you weird somewhere. And that's why I said the numerology thing is where there's also demons that can use numbers. And so you have to be really discerning with it. So I would never say God doesn't. That's not what I'm saying. Just be discerning with it. But isn't it fascinating? It opens up a whole nother kind of
because even in Revelations, 7 letters addressed to 7 churches. Yes. And it seems like in Revelations is where maybe it's a lot more.
And that's why. Well,
numbers.
Revelation is a apocalyptic literature with a lot of euphemism, allegory, and those sort of things. And it was intended to give us insights on some things. So you're talking about dragons. Is that literal? Is that metaphor? And so
7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 angels, 7 bowls.
Yeah, those are intentional. God did that on purpose because, like I said, the numbers do mean something in the Bible.
What do you think that is, though?
Well, I think it's about God executing His perfect plan.
Okay.
So whenever you see 7, it is always tied to something that God is doing. That's part of His plan and purpose, His intentions.
And could it be that numbers and math is the international language?
Yeah. That's
what I mean?
Too. Yeah.
Because
they are.
Yeah. There's all different words, but numbers are kind of just numbers.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, well, unless you take some people who are trying to change our math curriculum today, but
well, 2 plus 2
2 plus 2 could be whatever you want it to be.
Not equal 4 anymore.
Listen, in China and in the U.S., 2 plus 2 is 4. So there is something about the universal truth of numbers that does make sense when you're reading the Bible.
Yeah. Since we're kind of all over the map already in this, which is not unusual, and sometimes we do have, like we say, a definite path, but I wanted to ask you this too. And we had I think in our last podcast, we were talking more about what's going on in our world today. And yes, there is reason to be very concerned, but there's also reason to be very optimistic about what we're seeing right now in terms of what is allowed to be discussed again. And even talking about what we were just joking about 2 + 2 and saying it doesn't necessarily equal 4 anymore. Well, some of that craziness is kind of going away, which is a good thing. And I think as the truth is, we're finding an easier path, if not a more accessible path to the truth, which is certainly the case. But let me ask you something I was seeing recently on social media, and I have to be careful about how I go into this because I don't want to sound crazy, number one, and insensitive, number two. But I saw, and I brushed off the first time I saw this, and I think it was on social media somewhere. And again, my algorithm is crazy on social media. It's a lot of woodworking and hunting and fishing and barbecue, and then there's spiritual stuff, and there's certainly some. I follow, not necessarily follow. I just on my algorithm, I get a lot of really, really good pastors, and then I get some stuff that can be a little bit out there. This one seemed out there, but then somebody lined up some stuff, and even on a map, that kind of made me, and again, understand where I'm coming from on this. So the LA fires happened.
Yeah. Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
And somebody had then, and I can't even remember everything they connected to it. And so when you talked about, in our last episode, we brought up Sodom and Gomorrah.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of people have brought that up in association with the fires.
Yeah.
So, and then there was, somebody had brought up a scene from the Golden Globes where God was openly mocked 3 or 4 times, and everybody laughed. And this was the day all the stuff started to take off.
I saw that, yeah. Absolutely.
So then, of course, I know. I don't want to stretch, but then you look at, it even showed some of the first houses or neighborhoods or valleys in the home of, the valley where pornography was initially established and continues to this day, and how certain stuff burned really fast. And I'm not.
Yeah.
So don't think I'm going way, way out there, because I'm not. But then when I watch some of these things, but the fifth one I watched, connecting some of this stuff together, do you make anything of that?
Yeah.
Or am I just kind of being...
No, it's funny you bring that up. I didn't know that you're going to ask that. So I've had these conversations a lot lately, and it always happens. It coincides around some sort of natural disaster. Is that, are these signs of God's judgment on a city, for
that's why I'm asking,
wickedness,
I guess.
and so it's twofold. It's a twofold thing. And so, because I'll see people posting, I saw the Golden Globe Awards.
Yeah.
And they full on mock God. I'm not sugarcoating that. God said, God will not be mocked. You reap what you sow.
In an area where he's consistently mocked.
Oh, absolutely. LA is known.
Hollywood,
Hollywood. We call Vegas Sin City. Well, every city is Sin City. I mean,
sure.
We live in Portland. Portland, by per capita, has the largest film industry for adults in terms of
strip clubs,
pornography, adult entertainment, that kind of stuff. So, if you go by per capita,
sure,
well, we're worse than Vegas and we're worse than LA. So, I think the wickedness is in hearts everywhere. Are there some cities that I think represent greater magnitude of that? Sure. Hollywood represents, a lot of vanity. There's a lot more you can get into, like sin and wickedness, that cities can represent. I would say this way, because I've had people ask me, do you think the fires or things like those disasters, earthquakes?
And I'm just asking the question.
I've had this question asked. This is what I tell people. I said, first of all, God will not be mocked. You reap what you sow. So hold on, put that on the shelf for two seconds, because I'm going to come back to that. I would say right now, because oftentimes people will use Old Testament analogies of
Sure.
God sending destruction for judgment on cities. He did that in the Old Testament. The difference is we're not living under Old Covenant, Old Testament. What's the difference between that and now was the cross of Jesus, where the wrath of God was poured out on Jesus. So God's not pouring his wrath out right now.
Right.
That's
Right.
not.
That's kind of what I
Yeah. So because here's the thing though. I tell people, I go, well, yeah, but what about all the Christians that are suffering in the fire too?
Right.
Like, so
of course.
wait a minute.
Church
like,
is burned up, and I get it.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
like, hold on a second.
And I'm not making that connection.
But I'm glad
just
you did though, because
qualifying that.
actually, it's funny that we're going to talk about this because I've been asked this quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it's good that we're kind of putting this out there. But I will say, I'll come back to. So I think this: God has poured his wrath out. He did on Jesus. That was what the cross was, and why Jesus took the sin, the punishment upon himself. So God did that. His wrath was satisfied, if you will. Like, God's not going, well, I gave Jesus 50% of my wrath and I'm holding it out for, Los Angeles 2025. They get a dose of it. God poured the full wrath of sin on Jesus. That's what made what he did for us so sacrificial and so powerful. So now, once we settle that, let me bring back on the shelf. God said he won't be mocked. Does God allow suffering and natural disasters and tragedies? He doesn't create those things. And so God doesn't create evil. God's not the author of evil, but he is in control. What does that mean? He can prevent it. So God allows these things to happen. Again, we go back to when sin happened in Garden of Eden, it didn't just impact humanity, it impacted all of creation. So creation in and of itself, that's why the Bible even says creation groans. The world, creation, like the atmosphere, the earth, it longs for the future. And that's why the Bible tells us that when Jesus comes back in the future, this is all going to burn and he's going to create a new heaven and a new earth. That's in a future tense. So this world as we know it will not exist. There'll be a new one. And he says in that world, it will be as if he intended it. No weeping, no gnashing of teeth, no crying, none of that. It's going to be perfect harmony in the future, a new earth. There's not going to be natural disasters. But we live in this time now between garden past and new earth future. And so all wrath is already poured out. God's not bringing wrath. He's already done that. But we are in the times where these natural disasters happen. I believe some of these natural disasters are just because they've been going on since the Garden of Eden. The earth is groaning because it's broken because of sin, the effect of man's sin and so forth since the Garden of Eden. I also think some of these are man-made. I think some of these are man-made. And I'm not talking climate change. That stuff, I debate that with people, and I'm not going to get into that on this podcast of like, you got people quoting science.
It's its own religion, so just let it go.
And I'm like, I'm not even going to reference that. What I'm talking about man-made is it would not surprise me if like these fires were arson started. And
well, they did. They've already arrested
that's an
people.
easy belief to go, well, yeah, I mean, but I'm going to take it a step further beyond just a homeless guy starting a fire in a ravine, which is what they've said some of these are started from.
Sure.
I'm going to take it. No, I'm saying man-made intentionally at higher levels. I do believe that.
Like you're talking about Maui.
Oh yeah.
Because people, was of course
Of course. Like we know that they're talking about these smart cities and, these utopias they want to create. And we all know this, that there are things in the way before that. There might be zoning issues, permits. There might be people who own property. And I'm just saying right now, people are capitalizing on the ruin of other people. And it's a land grab for some people. And if you think that that's not happening, then you're living in la la land. We live in evil times when people will do anything to get and accomplish their will. So if I lived in Southern California, Santa Ana winds, I lived with those things. That's what happened all the time. If I want to use this,
presents an opportunity.
That's all I'm saying. Yeah. You don't even need a laser beam from a satellite to do it. Not that I'm saying those couldn't happen. I'm just saying,
remember that with the Maui fires? Everybody was talking about this laser beam.
What's that called? It's called something.
I know.
My point is, it doesn't have to be that complicated. I'm just saying, if I know the Santa Ana winds and I start a fire, I mean, a Boy Scout knows the physics behind that.
Oh, we've always said that if you're an eco-terrorist,
absolutely,
it's easy.
Absolutely,
all over the West.
All over the West. So am I ruling out that there's bigger, death rays and things like? Sure, I think that people are playing with those things. I think they're plausible. So I'm not saying they can't happen. I'm just saying, using the LA fires, I think that they can be man-made using things like Santa Ana winds as your combustion engine to make this thing spread like crazy, and then you profit off of that. Heck yeah, I think that's possible, and probably what is part of this. So how does that connect with God's judgment? All I'm saying is God will use anything, including natural disasters. He will allow them to happen to accomplish whatever his purpose and plan is. And God will even use, the Bible says that what man means for bad or evil, God can use for good. So I think that whether these things are natural disasters that just happen because we live in a sinful, broken, the planet is broke because of sin, not climate change, but because of sin, God will still use and work in the midst of these things. Or this is a disaster that was intentionally started by people who have nefarious agendas out, and they have their agenda. God has his agenda. And so, but we just have to live in days where it's like, who knows what's going on, but it wouldn't surprise me that people are doing things to try to get what they want out of that. And they don't care. There's an evil out there that is, we will ruin lives in order to get more power, get more control, get at whatever they want. Could you say some of it's negligent? There's always that side.
There's certainly incompetence, but
that's always a part of anything. Intentional incompetence, that's another factor that needs to be considered.
Or putting people intentionally incompetent into power.
Exactly. Oh, so absolutely.
And that's what so when I bring that up, and that's why I was hesitant to bring it up in the way that I brought it up, because part of me goes, when something like this happens, and then I see on social media a whole bunch of things coming out trying to tie this to the wrath of God, then I go, oh, don't go there, because then people who don't understand it are going to think you're nuts, and then they're going to think we're all nuts.
Yeah.
But at the same time, then about the 10th one I watched, I went, well, I'm just going to ask my pastor about this because I want to know what it means.
Like I said, though, God said he will not be mocked. You reap what you sow. And so what God's saying is there's consequences for that. And God will, and this is what I'm saying, is God will allow human choice. And because he allows human choice, evil plans happen because God gives choice to that. And yet God will use that. So like I even having pastor friends in LA right now who are in the midst of that. I have family down there and checking with them every week. How are things going? They're giving us reports. And I have a pastor friend who's right smack in the middle. He lives in the canyon there. I mean, his house they had to evacuate. He's, I don't know if we're going to get back to our house. So I'm talking about that first hand experience. And he said, maybe this, as evil as it is, tragic as it is, whatever the cause is, God will use this to return people back to him. Because you do see in the human condition a level of pride and wickedness are always tied together. And the Bible is so clear that pride comes before a fall. And so whatever wickedness you see in any city, Portland, LA, whatever, that wickedness, because there's a prideful attitude. And what you saw at the Golden Globes was arrogant, prideful, blasphemy. It was, I don't think even a coincidence. I'm not saying it was God. And I'm just saying, I think the sentiment was pretty clear that we are a city that mocks God. I'm not saying every person. I'm saying,
but that industry
is all I'm trying to say is that. And
even after they've been so humbled.
Absolutely.
And I mean, and Nikki Glazer, who I like, she's a comedian, she's funny. And she was even joking at the beginning of it, talking about how's your power now? Because you all lost that election, and kind of laughing about it, making light of it, because we all know where Hollywood stands.
Right.
And just so disconnected from reality.
Yeah.
And so arrogantly disconnected from, and the elitism. And I think some of those award shows, now when I was a kid, I'd watch those things, and and we had 3 TV channels, but the Academy Awards would come on and whatever. I don't remember the Golden Globes really, but the Grammys, that was all big time stuff. Now if I flip by that stuff and the smugness and the arrogance in those rooms, and not all of them, I know there's some good people there.
Absolutely.
But it's just like, it's gross to me a little bit now. And to think about how we used to revere it and look forward to it as kids, probably because we didn't have much to watch, and but it was neat. There was a quality, there was a humbleness a little bit, it felt like back in the day, and a classiness back in the day. Yeah. Now, it's just gross. And then the Golden Globes especially, and that's why Ricky Gervais, his monologue where he just took them apart, and everybody thought Nikki Glaser was going to do that because she's a roaster, and that her roast of Tom Brady was epic, and everybody was really funny too. And so people were kind of hoping she was going to go Ricky Gervais times 3 on them, but she really didn't. But and I'm not sitting here saying all entertainment's bad. I get the part of the entertainment, the smugness, and then the mockery of God, and just this arrogance and elitism. That was too much for me. And I didn't even watch it. I just watched clips of it.
But I think it was a good, I saw it. I didn't watch the whole show. I saw the clips of that, and I was like, ugh, everything inside of me went. But that's the human condition. It reminds me of the Tower of Babel in the Old Testament, where Nimrod, it's like, hey, we don't need God. We are God. We're going to do our own thing. We're going to build our empire. We're going to build that. That's been the human condition all along, is pride, arrogance that looks at God, mocks God. We are our own God. We'll build our own empires. And that could be in the cul-de-sac of the suburb that you live in down the street. So it's not just a geographic thing. But I do think that, like I said, I have pastor friends who are praying, God, would you, in the midst of this tragedy, would you bring revival? Would you? Because here's the thing. I do think God allows humans who've built their empires on pride and arrogance, that out of love, God doesn't create it. He allows it. He allows the empire to crumble, so that what crumbles is actually your pride. And it's in the crumbling of pride that humility can spring forth. And it's in the humility, the enlightenment of like, man, who are we? I need God. And you return back. And so I think God can work in the end. He actually is. I think God will work in this. I know I have pastors who are praying. The other thing I would say too is we also don't want to have the smugness that I've seen some Christians have, who do think, well, this is God's wrath and judgment on them. And then they kind of have this, self-righteous, and then they're not compassionate. And it's like, no, these are people who's lost their homes, lost memories, lost loved ones. We got to be compassionate. And because the Bible even says that God is gracious even to the wicked, not just the righteous. So,
otherwise we're just dehumanizing, which is what we're accusing them of doing.
Exactly. So you don't exactly. So I think it's a matter of but it does say, this can splinter off in a bunch of different stuff. You talk about God's redemptive plan. How does God redeem societies? God sometimes has to allow the pride of a nation, pride of a city, pride of a household, pride of a business to crumble, so that he can birth in that something new with life, because that's what he cares more about than what we cling to. We cling to our enterprise and our empires, and God's like, that's the path to hell, though, because it's not me. I'm not in it. So in the most gracious, loving, merciful way, he will allow whatever circumstances that... It's like I talked to a parent the other day. It's no different than this. A parent I literally have a parent whose kid has been a drug dealer on drugs, got arrested in prison. He's like, good, I'm hoping this will be the thing that God uses to turn him around. So that can sound harsh.
Yeah.
That them paying the price and reaping what they sow for the consequence of that can sound harsh. But he said, no, I think it might be the final thing to wake them up, to come back to God, come back to just even, this life they're living of self-ruin and self-sabotage. So that's a very micro of the macro of what God can allow, even man's evil plans or even evil, broken natural disasters. God can use that to bring his good.
Yeah. I got in a discussion. We talk about the Wednesday night guys we meet with, and talking about I've talked to a couple of guys just about being broken and how sometimes that is necessary. In fact, I was listening the other day. I've always liked Billy Bush. Do you know Billy Bush?
Oh yeah.
I just like him on the air, and he was on with Tucker Carlson recently, and Billy was talking about. I didn't talk about this on a podcast, did I?
I don't think so.
Anyway, so Billy kind of started climbing the ladder. I think he hosted Extra or Inside Edition or one of those shows. You know, he was always on those shows. But then he started to get bigger, and he got onto the Today Show. And it was early into that Today Show is when he had the conversation. Well, it was years prior, but when this tape surfaced of he and Trump, and this was in the 2016 election. It was all the way back that far, when the camera kept rolling and had gotten off a bus because it was going to shoot he and Trump coming off a bus on this tour. Well, their microphones were still on and it was still rolling, and that's when some stuff was said. Now, Billy didn't really do anything. Trump said some things that were offensive, and so Billy's career got crushed because of association. And it even had come out, and his executives had said, you know, and this hits close to me because I was in the TV business, and where it was always nerve-wracking. Did you say so on live TV? Did you say something, or could you say something, especially with a partner who really liked to walk that edge in Mike Rice at times, where, you know, there was one time he had a comment about, well, and it was pretty offensive to some, not horrible, but I always said, if he goes down, I'm going down. And I told my wife that a couple of times, because Steve Jones was my initial TV partner in the NBA, and then Mike Rice after Steve moved on to ABC and ESPN. And it was started off where Snapper had kind of been my partner, and now it was Mike. And then Mike and I got really tight at the hip to where it was Mike and Mike. And now you'll still hear it referred to as that. And I remember telling my wife, "That's it's great. It's funny." And there was Mike and Mike T-shirts, and and there was these Beaverton Bakery made these Mike and Mike birthday cakes. Believe it or not, I'll have to show you one.
That's awesome.
And kids would get them, which was really funny to me and humbling at the same time. But I said to her at one point, because Mike had a comment. It was a game at Golden State, and people used to do. They'd send in pictures from around the world. It was an Alaska Airlines sponsored piece that we'd come out of commercial break with. And there's always neat pictures from around the world. And really neat. The people would go and plan and wear their Blazer jerseys somewhere in the world. I think they still do it. I don't know. I don't watch anymore, but I think they still do it. And this couple happened to be in Israel. And I think they were like by the Sea of Galilee or somewhere. And he made the comment about, it was either something about bullets flying by their head or something. And it wasn't horribly offensive, but it got the phones ringing.
Wow.
And I could hear in my ear from the guys in the truck going, "What did he just say?" And I'm like, "Oh no." So my point in that is I laughed because I thought, by association, now that we're so joined at the hip, if he goes down, I'm going down.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
We go out together,
Yeah.
which ironically we did.
Yeah. Your wagon was hitched.
It was, but it didn't have anything to do with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, when we were all fired, but that had nothing to do with that. There was no reason at the time that was given. My point in bringing that up was Billy Bush was saying, when this thing happened with Trump, he said, "Well, I'm not associated with that. Nobody's going to bother me with that." Well, he was.
He was.
So when he was talking, and this is a long-winded way to get back to my main point, which when he was talking about, he said, "You know what?" He said, the one way I have to look at this was, even though it was unjust how I lost my job and my career got destroyed, and he's only now starting to rebuild it, really on something he didn't do anything. And he was on this meteoric rise, and he said, "My life," and I've said this before too, a little bit in terms of my own, I had 17, 18 really pretty easy years where everything just kind of came pretty easy. Career going great, and starting to get a little bit of, he said, and Billy said this, starting to drink the Kool-Aid, thought I was pretty cool, had a driver, all of a sudden I'm on the Today Show, and he says, in this interview with Tucker, he goes, "I think God said and thought, you have not lived yet," meaning I had not had my doors blown off yet. I had not been humbled yet, and I needed that to be able to have some kind of a perspective and start to rebuild. I know that's a stretch to associate and it's tied to what you're talking about, but I heard that. I was driving down the freeway and I rewound it. I listened to it again and I listened to it again, not just from how it relates to me and the perspective that I have with it, but then I've shared it with friends. The way that he termed having some easy times and having to be humbled, and then what he is now coming out of that being so much better, even though he didn't really do anything, but he said, maybe I needed my doors blown off. Oof. He goes, and nobody wants that, and nobody realizes that at the time. But afterwards you can say, just like I can in my situation with the TV world and all that way that ended, which is fine. There was nothing bad, but it just did abruptly end. I wouldn't go back and change it now.
No. And God worked in that.
And that's what he is saying, too. Yeah, so that does make some sense in terms, and it does tie to even stuff we were talking about 15 minutes ago. I took forever to arrive at it. But
that's a great illustration of that. Because when you take the idea from fires to Billy to you, that's where it gets personal. Because you can sit here and go, fires, they're in L.A., I have nothing to do with that. But what's the common theme that God does throughout the Bible is he invites us into more. But sometimes the invitation comes on the other side of something hard and sometimes even disastrous. I heard it said this way: you can either be humble before the Lord or be humbled by the Lord.
Oh, for sure.
And you can take your pick. And I think because pride comes before the fall, meaning that pride leads us to ruin. And so God, out of his own gracious and mercy, says, your pride is not the path. It's a path of ruin and disillusionment and all that. But humility, you see all over the Bible, humility is the gateway to God's blessing in your life. You want to live a blessed life, be a humble person. Or sometimes God says, I love you enough, I'm going to humble you. And you see that, like, for instance, I know a lot of times people live with this karma with God, this karma view of God. That's kind of ties into what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. Oh, so I got to live this good life so bad things don't happen to me. Listen, you can live the best life and you can be perfect. And that does not guarantee hard things. Why? Because it had nothing to do with God keeping score. It has everything to do with your character development. And so even if you are like, I'm hypothetically the perfect person, and you're going, there's no reason God could ever let disaster come to me. You're like, well, first of all, it's pride again to even think that. But also, God loves you enough to say, I'm not done with your life yet. And I'm going to allow times of testing. I'm going to allow times where you have to come back. I'll give a real quick example. The Old Testament was a perfect story when Israel was in bondage to Egypt. And God says, I want to lead you out of slavery. How awesome is that, right? So then what we find is God tells Moses, I'm going to lead them out. And where's he leading them to? He wasn't just leading them away. This is what people don't realize. God wasn't just delivering them from slavery. He was delivering them to the promised land. There was a destination. The promised land was a metaphor. It was a real place, literally, but it was also meant to be a foreshadow that Jesus is our promised land. That because the Bible says all the promises are fulfilled in him. He is our promised land. So when it talks in the Old Testament, it was a real place, a real like land of milk and honey and blessing and flourishing, thriving. That was meant to be a foreshadow. That's Jesus for us. He's our land of thriving, flourishing. So God says, I got to lead you out of this place of slavery because I have a better place for you. And as soon as they get out and they're up against the Red Sea and the army, they complain, they whine. They're like, it was better for us to go back. And God's like, really? Really? Like, if you would just trust me. And then he parts the Red Sea and they go across that. And then you would think after that, they would go, God, we totally trust you. No matter what, when you let us out of slavery, you parted the Red Sea. And it should have been a quick trip. It took them 40 years. But geographically, should happen in about 2 weeks. It took them 40 years. And they wandered, it says. They were lost and whining and complaining. And God's like, the whole thing was a test of, do you trust me? And because God says, if you trust me and you put your confidence in me. So what is pride? Pride is self-confidence instead of God confidence. And so God says, listen, the whole secret to everything good in your life is going to be, don't put your trust in yourself, put your trust in him. And they could have got there a lot quicker, but they didn't learn the lesson. They kept putting, and so God's like, I'm going to feed you, And you can read the whole story. There were several times when all they had to do was trust God, but it was a battle of them trusting themselves. Moses goes up and gets the 10 Commandments. He's taking too long. The people form idols because they're like, God's taking too long with Moses. And it's like, what? We do the same thing. And the human tendency towards self-worship, self-reliance, all of that is all part of the pride factor. So I think God uses a variety of ways to bring us back to a place of being humbled.
And being humbled is painful.
It's very painful.
And Billy talked about that a little bit in that interview and talked about, well, I can talk about this too a little bit, but he talked about those learning who friends are. And he talked about that through that industry where there aren't, I don't think there are many friends in that industry. And then thinking about what you said a minute ago, talking about getting humbled by God. The way I put that at the time was I kind of knew I was probably at the end and I had done it a long time and missed a lot. And I've talked about this before. Traveled a lot, missed a lot of my kids' lives, lived in guilt and shame, living in hotel rooms around the country during this season and during 7 months of the season. I always said I kind of knew that I had to make a decision. He just made that for me. And Billy kind of, when he was talking about this and he was talking about it on another interview, he said kind of the same thing. And then in talking about the people, he said, I got around people who were seeing me through my future glory versus what I did. And society's so quick to dismantle and destroy and stomp on and tear down people. And that happened to him. And so then I started thinking about that in terms of, and again, I think, we always know what the correct way and the correct thinking is in this, even if and going back to what you just talked about in the Old Testament, even if we know it and we've been shown it once, I have so many guys say to me, yeah, I agree. And I'm no better. How do I stay on that? Because I've gotten 1 or 2 really good lessons that should have changed. And now I should have that full faith, but I don't necessarily. And how do then I now, and here's the key in this, I think for me, and I don't really know, I'd like to say I know how, I should know how do I, speaking of future identities, and how do you then partner with the Holy Spirit to live through to your future identity now and not get so hung up and so destroyed and so distraught or so bitter about the process in which you were humbled. And there are a lot of people that are. I mean, I have to shake that off at times and go, especially if it's some kind of injustice and most people believe me, and I'm one too. You look back and you're pissed a little bit because you go, well, that wasn't fair. But how do you shake that? And how do you partner with, and this is a broad ranging question, I know, in terms of understanding our future destination then, and I'm saying this for the story I said about Billy and the story about myself, why don't we act more like we know what that future destination is?
That's a good point.
And I know that we're drawn to people who see us through our future glory. Why is it so hard for us then to act like we know what that future destination is? Even if we've been shown it, just like the 40-year trip, which should have taken 2 weeks and didn't even need a Thomas guide or Google Maps. Just listen and you'd be there already.
I know.
But we're no better.
I know. We're no better. We aren't any better. That's why we have those stories to become a reflection into our own soul and mind and life and go, gosh, God, what ways am I trying to build my life around my self-reliance?
We fight flesh with more flesh.
That's what we do.
Because we don't trust and we don't really act like we understand what our future destination is.
Yeah. It's funny when you were saying that, I was thinking like the two extremes that we often war between is self-pride and self-pity. And because on the one side, self-pride is an inflated view of yourself, and then self-pity can be a deflated view of yourself. And you see people who are wallowing in, I'm a piece of trash. and other people who go, I'm the greatest thing on the planet. You go, those are the two most unhealthy extremes that we ping pong. But I think the rest, and that's restlessness, because
that's what that is.
There's no rest in either of those extremes, but resting is in who God says we are. And doesn't mean we're perfect in terms of like, hey, no, we're a work in progress. But when you said the future us, it's almost like if we could get into a time machine right now.
Yes.
And Jesus is like, hey, come with me. He takes us into the future, because the Bible promises that even though we struggle now, we take a step forward, we take 2 steps back. God promises that he's going to work in us and perfect, that he will finish what he started in us. And we get glimpses of that. And hopefully we get momentum where you're going, I'm taking more steps forward than I'm taking steps back. That's awesome. But even if I'm taking 3 steps forward and half a step back, I'm still not perfect yet. I'm a work in progress. But God promises that in the future, when Jesus comes back, there's a time when he completes everything. We are complete in him. We are like Jesus fully. We're not wrestling with sin anymore. We're not wrestling with the flesh anymore. And so that's a future, and that's almost like if Jesus took us in a time machine and said, see, this is how I'm going to finish it for you. It should give us hope to go, oh, that's the end result. That's what this is going to look like. And it's like an architect and a designer who says, okay, we're going to do a remodel. But just so you know, like all the demo, it's going to get replenished. This is what the end result's going to look like. It's going to be amazing. And you go, oh, so it's worth it. It's worth it. Now, some of us are going through the demo, and some things have to be torn down because the studs are rotted. And so he wants to replace those and rebuild us into his image. But what that should do is give us a hope that there's a purpose behind the rebuilding. There's a purpose behind even the demos. And because it's leading us to his future glory and all that kind of stuff. And so then we should treat each other with that perspective. So seeing each other with that lens. That way, when someone is struggling, they fall back or they're backsliding, don't give up on them. Don't give up. Don't see them as, well, that's it. It's like, no, God might actually be using that backsliding season in their life to do something so unique in them. And like I said earlier, God works, the Bible says he works all these things for his good. And good is not what I think good. Like, I want good to be a comfortable life. I want good to be where everything's, convenient. And God answers all my prayers based on how I think they should be answered. But sometimes my prayer might not be a good prayer. It might be a selfish prayer.
Sure.
But it can sound good. I'm really convincing of myself. That's a good prayer, God, right? Yeah. That's a good one, God, right?
That's a good one. That had anything to do with me. Of course it did.
Man, I nailed that prayer. That was a good prayer. God's like, man, Mike, you're good. But I got a different kind of good. And the good in the Bible is defined by one person. His name's Jesus. So he's the barometer of good. So if I redefine good is not a life free of hard things. Good is more of him in me. So therefore, if that becomes the bullseye, then we're all working towards that end. And God is working all things, even hard things, towards that end.
Well, I know that went all over the place, but there was a common thread. There is a common thread in what we've been talking about. And what's funny, you said a second ago, and I don't oftentimes when we start off have notes, but one note I had, and it was like one sentence, was about when you just said time machine. I said one thing I was going to ask you going into this episode was, if you could time travel, where would you go? And to what time would you go? I was actually going to ask you that. And then you just brought up a time machine. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. How did we get there?
I have 2 honest answers and then 1 fake answer. Well, they're all
about
3.
Where you would go?
Yeah. Where would you go?
Well, I want to say, it would be hard, extremely hard to be at the crucifixion.
I know.
It would be very hard.
I know.
To be at the first Easter when the stone rolls away and Jesus walks out. Wow. I would like to be at the Sermon on the Mount. I would also like to, I would like to be in Times Square when World War II ended. You know what I mean? There's all kinds of things like that. There's a bunch of kind of crazy ones like that.
Hallmark times.
Yeah, there's yes. There's a lot of course, biblical ones. There's some really neat things that I would like to see. And a lot of people say I would like to be there for the birth of Christ. Well, I'm not sure. Yes, that would be awesome. I'm not sure the birth of Christ is what we have made it be on our bookshelf nativity sets with cute animals. And I'm not sure it was that way. But it might be really neat to be there. And I don't mean crucifixion in terms of,
yeah.
but I think the power behind
Oh my gosh.
the reaction of the Roman soldiers afterwards and everything else, I think would be insane to see. And Jesus appearing at the upper room to his disciples after he had come back and he was showing himself to them would be to see the looks on their faces would be insane. Those are a few. What are you?
Gosh, boy, you listed some good ones that I would agree with you.
And we could, and it's a whole nother question, but future, which I don't really have I don't have a huge desire to see into the future.
You know, it's so funny. I've actually thought through this quite a bit, and I have too many answers, but I'll give you a few. One, I kind of like to go back to the Garden Eden and look at Adam and go, dude, don't screw this up. Dude, don't do it. Eve, put it down.
Yeah.
Don't. You're going to jack this up for the rest of us. Honestly, there's a part of me wants to go back and just like,
that's
and again,
good.
that's, you know, whatever. God has a plan in that. But I'm just saying, I go,
But if we could go back.
yeah, I would love to go back to Adam.
But if we could go back, could we interact?
Well, see, okay, so that's now
This
that
is a back to the future question.
Do you have to be just a voyeur?
Yeah,
know?
you just
is that it? Or can you actually?
You can be Marty McFly and actually get involved. Screw things up. Step on
the almanac.
Step on some animal that wasn't supposed to be stepped on, and all of a sudden you come back and everything's different. That's pretty good, though. I didn't think Garden of Eden. That's way back.
Yeah, I like. What did they look like? I mean,
yeah.
God's perfect humanity and created them.
And I thought about back at Roman Colosseum.
I know,
for a sold out gladiator battle.
I know. If it's just a voyeur thing, it would actually be cool to go back and just like be the proverbial fly on the wall kind of thing, and just like conversations, even.
Yeah,
not just events, but I'd like to go back to that conversation, and so I would add not just go back in time, but go back in time where you can be in a room and go, they don't know you're there, and just to that kind of thing.
That's the way I always kind of envisioned it.
Yeah. Then there was a lot of things like what really happened in that conversation, what really was being said there. I mean, of course, going back to any moment of the life of Jesus, walking on water, being in the boat with Peter getting out, or
conversation with Nicodemus.
Yeah.
Whew. I know there's crazy stuff that I always think
about. And
The
Chosen's done a good job trying to help us.
Yeah, they have.
Like, that's as close as we could get to that. I also think about going back, and there's times I go back with my dad, going back to fishing boats. You would do the same.
Yeah.
Those bring back good memories. But I probably ultimately, if I can only pick one, if I really only could pick one time machine travel, I'd go to the future.
Really?
I would. Because everything based on what I read in the Bible, all things are restored. And so I don't need to even worry about what Adam and Eve did, because it's going to be restored in the future. I don't need to worry about missing my dad, because he'll be there. And so if I could pick one place, I'd go to the future, because I feel like it's the peaceful culmination.
Yeah, but you got to come back.
No, I'm staying.
No, this is not a one-way ticket, dude. This is a glimpse. You get to go to the past and witness something.
So that would be crazy, because if you do got to come back, let's say that you go to the future, you got to come back. That might be unbearable.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Then it might be like detrimental.
You wouldn't want to come back.
No, that's the point.
Yeah.
Like I just said, I'm not coming back.
Right.
So if you do, now it's torture.
Yeah.
You would. You'd be like tormented day and night going, oh, I saw it. It was so good. Oh, so then you almost go, do you really want to go there?
I always thought about that.
That's a good point.
When I watched like Back to the Future, and it's great, when Emmett Brown takes the note out at the end, and he's known all along, and I'm like, how did he live all those years knowing this was going to happen?
Yeah.
Because how would you, if it's spoiled for you, then you wouldn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why I think in this discussion, this hypothetical weird discussion, I think it could only be past.
I probably then
past event.
Yeah, you'd have to go to past.
You can go witness a past event.
Yeah, I would maybe though. Part of me would go, okay, if I could only go to the future, I'd go to the future with him, maybe the next 20 years, just out of curiosity of what else will happen in my lifetime. That would be the only future that I would say could be really fascinating. What's happening in the next 20 years? because then you could bring that back, and it wouldn't be like I said earlier, the future glory where you can't live today. But 20 years from now, if you had a little bit of a heads up on what technology we're going to have, or medical breakthroughs, or decisions that were made, and now knowing this, how would I, that would be fascinating.
Or if anybody's even left.
True. Absolutely.
I know. Well, that's cool. It's cool.
Fun thing to sit and talk about.
Well, it is. And that was one that we could have gone. I didn't even think we'd get to that. And then all of a sudden we veered into it, and you said time machine, and I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. Well, that's kind of what I thought earlier.
But real quick though, is and we should wrap up. But when you start talking about time, and you go, it's a concept that is only what we understand of time. Is there another definition of time that God lives by, which He does? He's not bound by space the way we are. God is above beyond that. And so there is a definition of time that God lives by that we just don't. We're bound. But you wonder at times, like, will we ever discover more of that? Will we ever move into that at some point and just see time differently than how we see it now? I don't know. It's fascinating. Fascinating to think about.
It is, and thanks for tagging along for sometimes these crazy journeys where they weave all over the place, and they don't have a defined pattern, to be sure, or a middle or a start, middle, and end. They don't. We just kind of go. So we appreciate you always listening to Vertical Pursuit. We love you, and we will talk to you very soon. We invite you to subscribe to our podcast, comment, or message us, and check out our website at verticalpursuit.org. Download the VP app and check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.